Believing in fate can negatively affect our lives by reducing our efforts and by allowing us to pass blame onto fate, God, karma, or some other force for things that are perfectly well within our ability to manage ourselves. Believing in fate gives us a victim mentality and causes us to miss great learning opportunities. But where does our desire to believe in fate come from? Why do we prefer a world in which something like fate exists? There are actually many reasons. For one, there's obviously more comfort involved in believing in fate. So believing in fate relieves us of a certain amount of accountability and responsibility. Well, I can't be blamed for things that are outside of my control, nor can I blame myself, or so I like to think. Yes, believing in fate subconsciously takes a little portion of everything and removes it from out of our control. Therefore, predestination and fate are comfortable positions. If my actions won't change it, I have every reason to not try as hard, or to not try again after failing multiple times, or to not face the possibility of embarrassment. Why would I want that? Indeed, nearly everyone we talk to will say that they believe in fate, karma, or some form of predestination, and dogmatically so. But when asked why we believe in these things, we refer to a few events in our lives that seem to have involved too much coincidence to be random. But while doing so, we overlook the hundreds of thousands of instances that involved no coincidence at all, but amounted to enormous changes in our lives. We also overlook the events that involved many coincidences, but amounted to nothing at all. See, the way we gather information is incredibly biased, but it sort of needs to be. We just can't remember everything about everything, especially since 99% of the time our lives are relatively uneventful. Therefore, it makes perfect sense that we overlook the 99 times that prove nothing in regards to fate or God, but remember the one time this month or this year that seems to suggest fate or God or karma are real. Imagine a bus containing 50 passengers crashes, killing everyone on board except 2 people. The families of the 48 people who died will recognize this event as an enormous tragedy, whereas the families of the 2 survivors will look at the same situation and say it's a miracle from God. Well, my brother was the only one who survived, except for that other guy, so it has to be a miracle from God. Let's think of some good things that have happened to us in our lives and ask ourselves 2 questions. Number 1, are the backstories leading up to major events in your life sometimes interesting stories and sometimes not interesting stories? And number 2, are you more likely to remember the interesting events within the interesting stories or the uninteresting events within the uninteresting stories? The truth is, we are obviously more likely to remember the interesting events involving amazing coincidence over the ordinary, routine, uninteresting events in our lives. Some call this flashbulb memory. There's another term for it. The name escapes me. The point is, we don't use the uneventful moments as evidence to support our case for the existence of destiny or fate or whatever, even though the percentage of uninteresting stories in our lives far outweigh the moments involving spectacular coincidence. As a result of this obvious truism, those who support believing in fate teach us that, coincidence or not, all life events are fate. That way, we conveniently overlook fate's shortcomings in logic. Rest assured, we will attempt to confront logic today. See, those who believe in fate nearly always claim that fate requires no coincidence or interesting events to occur in order to accomplish what it has predetermined will transpire. But this presents us with a clear contradiction. So many people say, well, I believe because I've seen things that are just too incredible to explain. See, if both the interesting and the uninteresting events in life are examples of fate, then the interesting stories involving coincidence that we use to prove the existence of fate actually prove nothing, seeing as the rules of fate dictate that everything is fate. Whether or not the story contains coincidence, or is interesting, or not interesting. Therefore, the proponents of fate refute the evidence that people most often use to support it. In addition to that, for karma to exist, destiny, the way we view it, cannot also exist at the same time and in the same relationship. The two views are mutually exclusive. Yet, somehow, just about everyone who believes in fate also believes in karma. The idea behind karma is that our actions change the future. The idea behind fate, or destiny, is that we have a predetermined life. The events within our lives were known and will transpire regardless of our effort. Otherwise, believing in destiny means that you believe in essentially nothing. Why even bother? I guess we just love titles or something. We also love identifying with belief systems, so there's another issue. Now, there is a very real sense in which karma does exist. If you're nice to people, they're probably going to be nice back to you and things like that, but putting that aside for now, we'll get more into that later. In regards to fate, if everything and anything changes the events of our lives, that's not fate. That's just life. Therefore, karma is nearly the opposite of believing in fate. When we do wrong, we say that karma will catch up to us. When we have the option to do something good for someone or to not do anything at all but choose to do good, we say that karma will repay us with good. And as we mentioned, let's take a moment to acknowledge that there are many subtle ways in which karma can, in fact, play out in a very real way. For one thing, if you're an asshole, lie, cheat, or don't treat people well, how long do you think people will do business with you? Naturally, people will only tolerate so much of a person until they've had enough. But people who are enjoyable to be around and conduct themselves in good form are far more likely to maintain good relationships with others, as well as reduce their amount of career-related problems they experience. So yes, it can certainly be that doing bad things to others will bring about more bad things in your life, but this should be common sense. We don't need to get out our fairy dust in order for any of that to be true. But that's exactly what some people do with the idea of karma. They think that there's some divine nature to it. But there really doesn't have to be. And what's more than that is that moods are contagious. Everyone's experienced times when they've taken on what we call the positive energy or negative energy or good vibes or bad vibes from others who we're around. Well, this too is not magical in any way. Stick around for the next part in this series when we'll dive deeper into this topic. Eventually, we'll turn fate and karma into a mathematical equation to help illustrate how they operate with the same rules and outcomes as those of random chance. Let us put our guards down, open our minds, and question the things we were taught to believe.